Welcome to the Thrival Journey. We're a new podcast dedicated to empowering entrepreneurs to uncover and embrace their purpose here on Earth. As multifaceted human beings, we strive to navigate our financial, mental, physical, and spiritual well-being. And that's what this podcast is all about. We're here to inspire, uplift, and equip you with the tools to thrive on your journey to greatness. All we ask in return is your support. 1, subscribe to our YouTube channel, or 2, download the podcast from your favorite platform. Your engagement, it helps us grow and attract incredible guests who will enrich your life with valuable insights and wisdom. Now, in turn, we promise to keep bringing you content that enlivens, edifies, and elevates your journey, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a human being. And with that, I want to thank you for being a part of the Thrival Journey. Yeah, I was reading about you, and I was looking at you had a blend of Taoism, Buddhism, and Christianity, in which I practice Nichiren Buddhism. So I know that had there's some similarities in all of those. And how does those teachings play in your transformation of your journey?
Different pieces at different times, of course, but if I just bring a little piece of brain science in here, and the Eastern masters knew this thousands of years ago, and our neuroscientists are just proving it's true, but you really can't quiet or turn off negative thinking or negativity, or because it's built into us for a survival instinct. We always have to be aware of dangers and be sensitive to dangers. When we were in the jungle, we had to be aware of sounds and things that might present dangers to us. So our mind is always scanning for that, and we always are going to allow it into our consciousness. So there's no real way of quieting it. But you can balance it by cultivating the opposite.
What are the misconceptions that you find about meditation?
Well, first of all, people think that meditation has something to do with quieting the mind or finding peace and serenity. And you don't meditate to do that. Now, as a side benefit, you may get that, but you don't do it for that.
Okay.
So the best thing I can say is, so there have been times, I'm sure, where you've been in a regular conversation with somebody and you really want to listen to what they're saying, and then at some point you realize that your mind drifted off.
Yeah,
right?
It's happened.
It happens all the time, and at some point, though, you kind of like wake up. You kind of get this little startled feeling that oh, I'm not listening. You realize that you're not listening, right? And usually that's followed by a flood of judgments. Oh, I should have been listening, and now I'm not listening. Now I lost what he was going to say, and how am I going to go back? And I don't want to embarrass, blah, 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 right?
Yeah, all the noise.
After a couple of moments, though, that noise quiets down, and you go back and start listening again, right? So that's what meditation is, but we set it up artificially.
Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Beat up, bullied, and dunked on. Bullied and dunked on. Let's get it.
Welcome back to the Thrival Journey. Today, we welcome an extraordinary gentleman, Bob Martin, a man whose life story reads like a blockbuster movie to me, from the high-stakes courtroom drama of Miami's cocaine cowboy era as a mob lawyer to becoming a certified meditation teacher and professor of wellness at Elon University. Bob's transformation is nothing short of remarkable. A 2-time author, mindfulness guru, and an expert in blending Taoist wisdom with modern brain science. Bob is here to share his journey of resilience, clarity, and finding peace in life's chaos. So I really let's just get ready to be entertained and inspired by Bob. How you doing, Bob?
Thanks, Michael. I appreciate you having me on the show. I, it, I think you ought to take a moment to give yourself a pat on the back. You know, putting a podcast together is not an easy thing to do, and it's got to be an act of love just to create a platform for folks like me to come on and be able to share, the stuff that we love. So I just really want to thank you for that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll do that because no, it's not it's not an easy quest. But I do have a partner. She helps produce,
Hmm.
Yvonne, and it is a love. We find the love in being able to, and I find a love in being able to have conversations with people like you who have great stories to tell and to share it with the world. And it's just a joy to have that and for people to get something from the stories that you have. So thank you.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay.
Let's really talk about let's get you in the know of people and who is Bob Martin?
Who is Bob Martin? Bob Martin is the son of some Eastern European, Hungarian dad and a Roma gypsy mom. Grew up in an amusement park atmosphere. We were the popcorn cotton candy folks.
Okay.
And much to my father's dismay, I wound up becoming a lawyer. He says he always thought of lawyers as blood sucking vultures, So,
Okay. A
so
lot of people may agree with that.
it's funny when people say, "Oh, here's Bob Martin. He's a lawyer." I always say, please don't hold it against me.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but I started out my career in Miami during the '70s, and if anybody's ever seen the movie Scarface or the TV show Miami Vice,
Hmm.
those were those days. And I will tell you from personal experience that vibe that you get from that movie Scarface, that
Hmm.
that was Miami. It was that was the vibe that was there then. So I started out as a prosecutor, and I worked for Janet Reno. For those of you who don't know the name, she wound up being the Attorney General in the Clinton administration,
Hmm.
and we rose up in the office. I had a pretty good career there, and wound up in the Economic Crimes and Consumer Frauds Division. And I got together with a federal task force, and we wound up hitting the mob for a lot of money. And when
Hmm.
I say the mob in Miami, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about at that level where the Italians are speaking to the Colombians and the Haitians and the Cubans and the Peruvians, and everybody kind of cuts up their pathways to import in the import export business, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so we hit them for a bunch of money. I went out in private practice, and they came to me, the mob, Italian fella named, I'll call him Johnny, and basically he said, you got to be pretty good to beat our lawyers, and so we want to start sending you some clients. And so I didn't become like consigliere, like advisor to the mob. I started getting a lot of referrals from them and hanging out with them, and so they were the cocaine cowboy days. And if I, kind of confessionally, I'll tell you, I was hanging out with them and I was doing a lot of that stuff. And
Hmm.
on a personal level, my life was kind of falling apart.
Right.
Professionally, I was making a lot of money. I had a lot of respect. I was one of the top lawyers and doing high profile cases and all that. But personally, not so great.
Not so great.
I
Yeah.
was seeing I was seeing a therapist, and I came to a real important crossroads in my life. I went and I asked my therapist. His name was George. I said, George, what should I do? And rather than giving me some therapeutic questions or the like, he picked up some coins and started shaking them in his hands and throwing them on the table and counting the heads and the tails and making some mathematical computations. And here I'm thinking, whoa, I'm paying this guy to be my therapist. And now what is he going to do? Pull out a bunch of tarot cards or something?
Yeah.
Uh, So I'm getting more and more pissed off, but finally he comes to the solution of his math and he comes up with a number and he opens this book to that chapter number, and the title of the chapter was Retreat. And he shows it to me, and I curse him out, stomp out of the office, but it's like that word got tattooed on my forehead. Retreat, retreat. So I started pulling back from, some of my excessive behaviors, and it really stopped me from going all the way down the rabbit hole. And I went back to George and I said, well, what was that thing that you did? And he says, well, Bob, that is something called the Classical Book of Changes. It's called the I Ching.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, where does that come from? And he goes, it's Taoist. And I go, what's Taoism? And so I learned then that my therapist turned out to be a disciple and also the English language editor of, and dig this, a 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple.
Really?
Think about that. 1,400 years of wisdom being passed down from father to son to father to son.
That's extraordinary. When you said 72nd generation, I'm like, that's years, thousands of years.
About 1,400 years. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And, the Shaolin Temple, that's where Kung Fu comes from, and Tai Chi, and Yin Yang, and all that stuff. And so those are all Taoist practices. So I didn't grow up with any kind of religion, really. My folks, all of my ancestors were wiped out by one group or another. My dad's ancestors were wiped out by the Bolsheviks after the Russian Revolution in the early part of the last century.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was Roma Gypsy, and everybody kind of blew them away. So they just didn't believe much in a merciful God. So I didn't grow up with that conversation. And so when I met Master Nee, it was like this guy just bowled me over. He was just absolutely. I'm sure, Michael, you run into some people that you meet them and you just go, wow, this guy's real. This is the real thing. And that's who he was. And so I wanted to study under him and learn under him. And I studied with George and Master Nee for 8 years, and it changed my life.
Yeah, I was reading about you, and I was looking at you had a blend of Taoism, Buddhism, and Christianity, in which I practice Nichiren Buddhism. So I know that had there's some similarities in all of those. And how does those teachings play in your transformation of your journey?
Different pieces at different times, of course, but if I just bring a little piece of brain science in here, and the Eastern masters knew this thousands of years ago, and our neuroscientists are just proving it's true. But you really can't quiet or turn off negative thinking or negativity, or because it's built into us for a survival instinct. We always have to be aware of dangers and be sensitive to dangers. When we were in the jungle, we had to be aware of sounds and things that might present dangers to us. So our mind is always scanning for that, and we always are going to allow it into our consciousness. So there's no real way of quieting it, but you can balance it by cultivating the opposite, by cultivating loving kindness and compassion. And you can actually build up the other side of your brain and use that to dampen or govern, your negative impulses. And so through my teachings with Master Nee and the like, we did that. We intentionally cultivated things like loving kindness, gratitude, generosity, and the like. And at some point in that process, Michael, your heart opens, and you can feel it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And once that occurs, the only thing that you want to be the main purpose in your life is to reduce, suffering among other folks. And so whatever you do, whatever business you do and engage in, and however you decide that you want to make money, you always have this consciousness, of doing no harm and trying to make a difference with everybody that you come into contact with. And the funny part about it is not only is that giving you a happy life, but it also is good for business.
Yeah. Right.
When you take care of your customers with kindness and compassion and care and real attention to what their needs are, they're going to come back to you.
Yeah. It's like you're caring for their immediate need, but there's something else deeper there that
Mm-hmm.
you're connecting with to have them, get your services returned to you for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
When
And
you,
as well with the people that you supervise and that you manage.
mm-hmm.
If you really care, to make sure that you give them the information that they need to do a good job,
Do a great job, yeah.
that you gently, help to guide them and the like, and that you really put an effort into their progress, they don't ever forget that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's the saying that you may forget what somebody says to you, but you'll never forget how they made you feel.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so true.
That's your connection. So would you have an extraordinary story from my perspective? I'm pretty sure for others. You had talked about in that cocaine cowboy era, you were very arrogant,
Mm-hmm.
but it changed. You transformed into the person that we're talking to now. What was the biggest transformation? I know that you did the training with I Ching, but what was the transformation that sticks out to you? What story can you tell about that?
Oh, so many. Let me just, um, well, I really haven't shared this in publicly, but as you ask me the question, I can't get away from it. So,
Okay.
so in my meditation training, okay, again, remember, I grew up without a conversation around God or angels or demons or devils or any kind of supernatural beings. You know, Taoism talks about energy and the flow of energy through the universe and the like. And, because we understand that there is electricity and that it does do work, it's not hard to buy into that idea.
Hmm.
But the idea of having a connection with an intelligent energy was beyond my touch. So I'm at a silent retreat for a week, and we do this exercise called body scan in the morning. And when you do a body scan, the guidance, the guiding teacher, will say things like, okay, bring your attention to the big toe of your left foot, and
Hmm.
just notice whatever physical sensations might be there. And if there aren't any, it's okay. Just notice that there aren't any. Just bring your attention there. And if you feel a slight tingling, that's fine. And if you don't, it's okay. Just, bring your attention there. Notice whatever physical sensations are present. And then when you're ready, bring your attention to all of the toes of your left foot. And then you go through your left foot and your heel and, all the way up your leg. And you scan your entire body, noticing. And the whole idea of it is to reconnect with your physical sensations,
Yeah.
because what we learn later is that your emotions are nothing more than physical sensations and thoughts that are combined.
Hmm.
And so learning more about the physical sensations, being able to identify, gives you a little bit more ability to manage your emotions
Hmm.
from the physical end of it. So that's why we do the meditation. And then once we scan the body, we start imagining ourselves breathing in to the entire body, not just to our lungs, but breathing into our body, and just having that mental imagery of connecting. And then I was there, and about halfway through this one particular time, I took a breath in, and for me, it was unmistakable. There was the presence of an energy in my body that filled my whole body. And, I can't describe it adequately. It's just, for me, at that moment, I understood that there was an intelligence, there was a consciousness that was something that was outside of me, that was there and that I connected and touched. And after that experience, it's one of those things like, when people say you can't unsee it,
Right,
I
right.
could never unfeel it. It was there. So I would say, for me, that was, a major transformational moment in my life. Yeah.
And this is, now you've been practicing at this time, your spiritual practice. Was that just a kind of like an elevation to where you are now?
I'm sorry. Ask me again.
So this is like when you get that experience, this was past, your cowboy era days, and you were now practicing. Was that an elevation into like a deeper sense of what you were practicing?
I remember Jack Cornfield wrote a book that said, after the Enlightenment. And it relates to a story where the student is coming to the master and says, Master, I think I'm enlightened. I've been enlightened. And he goes, No, you haven't. Go back and practice some more. And he comes back and he goes, No, Master, I'm enlightened now. He goes, No, go back and practice some more. So finally, after several times, the student comes and he truly, you could see that there was this change. And he says, I have felt it. I am enlightened. And the teacher said, Yes, you are. And so the student says, Now that I've been enlightened, what? What's next?
What now, right?
Right? What now? And the teacher says, The laundry. So, you have these experiences and you have these, aha moments and these things. And then, you have to go and do the laundry and you have to get up the next morning and go to work. And, you have the same troubles and trials and other things. But you always have deep within you this sense and this knowledge that, there is something that's greater than you. And I think that concept, that the understanding that my ego, my identity, my shield of protecting who I am are the things that actually imprison me. And when I can let go of my shields that are up there to protect my vulnerability, the very, unusual thing happens that I become invulnerable. I mean, if I can live my life saying, hey, I am what I am and I is what I is and I'm Popeye the Sailor Man, whatever you see is what you get, it's real hard to hurt me.
Yeah.
And it's so counterintuitive because we think we have to protect ourselves when lowering the shields is really the ultimate protection. And it's just how counterintuitive. So when you begin to understand that your ego is really insignificant and you start to live your life for something greater than yourself, that's when you find happiness and joy and unbridled joy, unrestrained joy. I don't know if I'm getting too touchy-feely here, but
no, there's the spiritual part of everything that you're saying, but then there's also the human part where we're living in a world day to day, and we're bombarded with all these things on the outside, be it social media, be it the news,
Mhm.
politics, whatever it may be. And we're engulfed by all this stuff, right? What then there is there that we can connect to that would kind of take us away from that and connect us to something that's greater than who we are?
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question. So that's where I think, meditation comes in and is very, very helpful. And it kind of connects, with our understanding of how the brain works now. Like I say, the ancient Eastern masters, they knew this 4,000 years ago. And our
Hmm.
present brain scientists are only now confirming that what they understood is the reality of our brain.
Hmm.
Um, so, if I could just get into brain science for just a little bit to answer your
I
question.
was going there, but go ahead, jump in.
Okay. So, we have a right and left hemispheres of the brain. Everybody knows that. And the front of the brain is called the prefrontal cortex.
Right.
Now, the right side of the prefrontal cortex is where our sympathetic nervous system is, our fight, flight, stress response.
Hmm.
The left side is our rest and digest, relaxation response, or the parasympathetic nervous system. So
Okay.
this is what in Taoism we call yin and yang.
I got it.
These are the countervailing forces. Now everybody would say, "Oh, I wish I was all left brained." But if you were all left brained, you'd be kind of scattered and kumbaya, and everybody's nice, and you never get anything done.
Hmm.
You need to have a little stress in your life, to motivate you. If you know that the roof needs to be patched, yeah, I'll get to it someday. If it starts to leak, you get stressed, you go fix it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So you
System in the
need
show.
to have that right side that's going to motivate you and cause you to move forward and take care of issues. Sometimes you need to punch through.
Hmm.
And you don't want to be like, blood dripping from your fangs, aggressive and, go to war. You need the other side, which is healing and compassion and everything else to balance it out.
Yeah.
So what brain science has found is just like you say, you get this barrage of stuff coming at you. And the reason that most of it is negative and the reason that we're aware of most of the negativity is because our brain evolved to be especially sensitive to anything that is dangerous.
Hmm.
You know, when life is simple, like in the jungle, it's a tiger or a snake or a poison berry,
Hmm.
something like that. We tune into that immediately. And
Hmm.
our brain is designed to do that. Unfortunately, in our modern life, those kinds of dangers aren't tigers and snakes anymore. They are deadlines. They are bottom lines.
Hmm.
They are, profits versus losses. They
Right.
are, you
Right.
know, they are
Right.
all of these things. And it's a chronic, undifferentiated type of threat that causes us to have this chronic, undifferentiated, stress.
Hmm.
And stress on a physical level, it actually, cortisol, which is one of the hormones that dumps into your body, it actually dissolves and it erodes the protective coating on our nervous system.
Hmm.
So we get edgy and jumpy and more quick to anger and the like over
Hmm.
time. So what the Eastern masters learned and what the brain scientists tell us is that there's not a thing you can do to suppress it. You can't turn it off. You
Okay.
can't. What you can do, though, is you can intentionally and consciously build up the electrical activity on the left side of your brain.
Okay.
You expose yourself to beauty and awe and love and kindness and generosity. And by building that up, you return to balance.
Okay.
And that governs that negative side. And so, what we learn in meditation and what you learn when your heart opens is that the path is not to stop doing stuff, It's to start doing stuff that gives you joy.
And it's also what I'm also hearing is it's the acknowledgement of what those things are, but then having a tool to balance those issues. And
Right.
when we're talking, the podcast is and the emphasis on, entrepreneurs, but our audience is more than that. So what can you speak to as far as like steps for people to take when I'll just use myself as an example, like when I have all these different projects that I'm doing and it may not seem like it right then and there, but there's the influx of information, right? And then sometimes I'll get so much of the influx of the information that I'll freeze, you know? And then I know that I have to kind of just stop, get away from it, walk outside for a minute, take some breaths, and then do kind of like a walking meditation, just so I can get back to self. What would your steps be for people that either they freeze or just get scattered or whatever their response would be to that overwhelming
Okay.
information?
So this is what I would say. Somebody asked me a different question once. They said, because we were talking about like getting a feel for the dynamic of the energy of the time that you're in. Now, like if you and I are speaking and I have a great idea and I want to share it with you, but you're not in the mood to listen,
Mm-hmm.
I would be wasting my time by trying to force you to listen.
Mm-hmm.
That's the time is just such that you're not listening. So the more effective and efficient thing to do would be to pull back a little bit, to retreat a little bit, and go over what it is that I want to tell you. Maybe I could refine it a little bit more. Maybe I could think about your particular listening and how to say it in a way. So then when you turn to me and you say, now, what was it that you wanted to tell me?
Mm-hmm.
I am ready to say it in a much more effective, efficient way.
Right.
That
Right.
conserves my energy and it also refines my presentation. So I've become more effective and more efficient, and yet I have expended less effort,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I haven't spent I haven't spent the effort to try to force you to listen when you weren't ready. And there's all kinds of times. There are times to progress and times to retreat and times to wait and times to punch through and the like. And so if you become sensitive to those times, it's helped. So I'm trying to get to my point. I'm sorry it's taken a bit.
It's okay.
So somebody once asked
I'm
me,
learning some stuff.
well, you say that there's a time to retreat, but I mean, isn't retreat surrendering? And so what I said, the answer to that was no. If the retreat is surrendering, then what happened was you missed the proper time to retreat. You missed it. You
Okay.
went past it, and then you became in chaos. You got immersed in chaos, and because the proper time to retreat is when you could pull back with enough energy to regroup and come forward again.
And then go forward again.
You
Yeah.
missed it, and now you're lost.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'll get back to your question. So if you are getting to the point where you say, I just got to break this, I got to take a walk, I got to get out of here and stop, then perhaps you missed the time that you should have pulled back. So by becoming aware of how you felt when you finally became overwhelmed and said, I got to stop, if you become sensitive to exactly what that feels like to be overwhelmed, then what will probably happen is you'll be able to sense when that overwhelm starts growing.
Yeah, I was going to ask
Right?
you when are you able to sense that?
Right? So it's just a matter of practice. It's just a matter of when you start feeling overwhelmed, you ask yourself questions like, where am I feeling this in my body? When did I first start feeling this? What are my thoughts when I am feeling this way? You just start inquiring, like what is this feeling? What is it? physically? What is it mentally? And then ask yourself, when did I start feeling I was becoming overwhelmed?
Mm-hmm.
So if you ask yourself those questions, you'll be able to identify it fairly simply. And by doing that a few times, then maybe not the next time, but maybe the next time or the next time, as you start to feel overwhelmed, you say, wait, let me take a 2-minute break instead of a 15-minute break. That littler break. It's, you ever watch people doing yoga and they're doing the tree pose
Mm-hmm.
where they
Yeah, I've seen
have
that.
one leg down and they got one leg on their knee and they look like they're standing so stable?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at their foot, the foot's going,
Yeah, there's little
it's making these
rotation.
little adjustments, right? To
Mm-hmm.
stay in balance.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we want to get to a point where we can start making those little adjustments as we go, rather than having to make a big adjustment when we get to overwhelm.
What's up, Thrival Journey listeners and watchers? Look, if you're someone with big dreams of entrepreneurship but need a flexible way to earn income while building your business, let me tell you about the Orions Group. Through our partnership with Arise Virtual Solutions, you can become a customer support professional, aka CSP, and start earning from home on your own terms. Arise offers a streamlined certification process, getting you trained and ready to work with well-known brands all across America. You can set your own hours, choose the clients you want to work with, and create a work-life balance that fits your entrepreneurial goals. The best part, you don't have to choose between your side gig and your business dreams. Being a CSP with the Orions Group means you can bring in extra income while have the flexibility to focus on growing your own venture, much like I did. Whether you're looking to supplement your income or need a bridge while building your empire, this is the opportunity for you. You interested? If so, head over to www.theorionsgroup.com to learn more about becoming a CSP with the Orions Group. Look here. Support your entrepreneurial journey while supporting the Thrival Journey podcast at the same time. All right, one more time, www.theorionsgroup.com. All right, we're done with the spot. Let's get back to the podcast. Yeah, there's a lot of things that I'm learning now and through different podcasts about balance. Like, again, I say this before, that like riding a bike, you find balance, but sometimes when you don't ride the bike for a while, you got to find balance, and those are just small, you know, small ways you have to, correct yourself to the left or to the right. And I think that there's a practice as being human and being human that we need in order to find and continually create balance for ourselves.
Yes, yes.
And I know that a lot of that comes through people who do meditate. What are the misconceptions that you find about meditation?
Well, first of all, people think that meditation has something to do with quieting the mind or finding peace and serenity. And you don't meditate to do that. Now, as a side benefit, you may get that, but you don't do it for that.
Okay.
So the best thing I can say is, so there have been times, I'm sure, where you've been in a regular conversation with somebody and you really want to listen to what they're saying, and then at some point you realize that your mind drifted off.
Yeah,
right?
It's happening.
It happens all the time. And at some point, though, you kind of like wake up. You kind of get this little startled feeling that oh, I'm not listening. You realize that you're not listening, right? And usually that's followed by a flood of judgments. Oh, I should have been listening, and now I'm not listening. Now I lost what he was going to say, and how am I going to go back? And I don't want to embarrass, blah, 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 right?
Yeah, all the noise.
After a couple of moments, though, that noise quiets down, and you go back and start listening again, right? So that's what meditation is, but we set it up artificially. And we set it up in such a way so that you can have that exact same experience over and over again, so that the experience of it becomes routine instead of emotional. And that produces all kinds of insights. So the way we set it up is we say, let's form an intention to put our attention on our breath or on a candle.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that. So then within 3 seconds, my mind goes off and I'm thinking about, did I leave the stove on? What's my wife going to say when I get home? I didn't forget the grocery. Blah, blah, blah. Have I fed the dogs? And blah, blah. And then at some point you go, oh, I'm not paying attention to the candle. And that's followed by a flood of judgments. I'm doing it wrong. I can't keep focus. I'm not concentrating. And then after a while, that all quiets down and you go back to putting your attention on the candle again. Then your mind goes off again. And then you wake up and you come back and you begin again. And this happens several times. So what comes out of that, and it's really experiential. I can describe it to you, but, like the Buddha said, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. I can describe it, but you really have to just experience it. At some point, you start noticing that you're noticing your thinking. Because now that you've done it a few times and it's no longer weird or odd to you, it's just kind of routine, you kind of like get it that, oh, I'm looking at my judgments or I'm watching my thinking. And once you notice that you're watching your thinking, you get this amazing thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing is you go, oh, I'm not my thoughts. I'm watching my thoughts. I am not my thoughts. And that alone, once that happens, you can't ever unforget it. You can't ever unknow it. Because then you know that when you say, I had a thought, you will always ask yourself, who is the I that had the thought? And so I'm no longer my thoughts. I am the creator of my thoughts. Because for the most part, we all believe that we are our thoughts, like that old, that toy store, Toys R Us, thoughts are us.
Thoughts are us.
Thoughts are us, right? I have a thought and I have bias. I have a judgment about somebody or about myself, or that committee in my head says you're not good enough. I mean, that's my truth because I thought it. It becomes my truth. And when I realize that I'm not my thoughts, all of a sudden your thoughts become clouds passing in the sky, some little electric pulse that's floating through your brain. You can't hold them. You can't sell them. You can't trade them. I mean, they come from somewhere and they're here for a moment and then they're gone. And when you start to get that in this little practice of just wandering, waking up, returning, beginning again, wandering, waking up. So you're not quieting your mind. You're allowing it.
You're allowed to be.
You're allowing it. You're not restricting it. You're just letting it do what it wants to do. And I often think it's kind of like a little bratty kid in your head, and it wants to bother you with all these stupid thoughts.
Needs all the attention.
Yeah, and when you give it your attention, you start, stop it. I don't want to think this anymore. It's like you energize it. But when you let it be, when you allow it to just be, and you just sit back and, say, well, that's an interesting thought, or I wonder where that one came from. It's like the same thing as a child who's being bratty in a room, and you say, I don't want to play that game. I'm going to go in the other room. I'm going to deprive you of my attention. Let you do whatever you want to do. They very quickly get bored of it and they come over. And your thoughts do the same thing. What you resist persists. but what you can be with will let you be. And so it's all counterintuitive. And you start to explore this counterintuitive metacognition of watching your thoughts. And you start to, become more understanding of yourself.
Mm.
And after you see, you watch and you see the same thought coming up, and it's a thought like, you're not good enough. Well, if my brain tells me I'm not good enough, and it does it every once in a while, it's going to affect me badly.
Right.
But if I see it over and over, and I see it 100 times, I'm going to get so bored and sick of it and tired of it that I'm going to disempower it. I'm going to say, well, that's stupid.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that this thought has been running my life.
Yeah.
And so when you get to that point, it goes away. You can't make it go away. You can only allow it to come and get bored of being here, and then it kind of goes away.
All that, I have so much to ask, but
Okay.
let me try to streamline it a little bit. Just saying, in the world of neuroscience, when you're going back to the beginning of this conversation, when you're noticing what you're noticing about your thoughts, you're in a certain place, is there a name for that? Is a name for that place?
Metacognition
Metacognition.
is the process of thinking about your thinking.
Okay. I've heard the word. I didn't know that that's what it meant. Okay, so perfect.
That's what science is called, the process of thinking about your thinking. And and we all know that when we metacognate, we almost feel we're in two places at the same time. So here, when people talk about peace and serenity and stability and the like, they're not talking about some mood that comes over you and transcends you and transports you away from life. It is this metaphor. So most of the time, we live life like we're floating on a log going down a river. Okay. And the river is life, and the log is our thoughts, and we're just riding our thoughts going down the river.
Okay.
Sometimes the river is nice and calm. Life is good. I got everything I need. I'm comfortable. But then it gets a little choppy. And then there's whitewater. Then there are waterfalls. Then there are floods that sweep away your home. I mean, there's disaster. There's all kinds of characteristics of the river. And if you're just riding on that log, you're going to experience the full width and breadth of everything life can give you. The goods, the bads, the ugly, the ups, the downs, the dangers, the calmness, all of that. We never want to leave that alone, because that's important for us to be able to gauge, how we respond to stuff. We need to know what the river's doing.
Right.
If the river's flooding, we need to be protecting ourselves. If the river's nice and calm, we need to be relaxing. We need to know that. But when you are in metacognition, when you're watching your thoughts, like I said, we just said, you feel like you're in two places at the same time. So from the log, life can be ups and downs in a roller coaster. But from the place of thinking about your thinking, it's like climbing up on the bank of the river and watching yourself on the log. Now, from the bank of the river, you're objective, you're stable, you're calm, you're not emotional, you're stable and peaceful. So that's where the stability of meditation comes from. We get more skillful in being able to pay more attention to the part of us that's on the riverbank than the part of us that's in the river.
This is us noticing what we're noticing. Now, that's pretty deep, and there is a practice that needs to happen in order for that to actually occur in our lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, as people are in this 2025 in this space in our lives, um, how does one go about, with all the outside noise, how does one go about really creating that for themselves? And
Sure.
then noticing that they are actually doing it.
So you go to the gym, and the first machine you get on might be the treadmill, and it's going to be flat, and you're going to be going at 2 miles an hour or 3 miles an hour,
Mhm.
and you're walking flat. As you get a little bit more skillful with it, you're going to give it a little tilt, and as you get a little bit more skillful, you might move to an elliptical. Then you might start jogging, then you might start working with weights. So it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, it the initial process is just what I've already described. It's no more difficult
More difficult. Okay.
than taking a few minutes to put your attention on something and watching your mind wander. And there are lots of guided meditations, that will, guide you through that process. Of course, I have to say, there's nothing like a coach. If you want to learn yoga, you can learn it from apps, and you can learn it from YouTube. But there's nothing like a coach that says, no, move your shoulder a little to the right, move your
Right.
foot a little bit to the left. Those little adjustments can make a huge difference in how you progress.
Mhm.
So there's nothing like a coach, but you start off, on a treadmill with just doing this little practice, 5-10 minutes a day of watching your thinking. And from that, you start, so then the first stage is that you start to get that understanding that you're not your thoughts. Okay. And then that's like the first step, that you would take. Once you get that you're not your thoughts, the next thing that we usually move on to is something we call labeling thoughts.
Mm.
Not only not my thoughts, but now let's start looking at what are the thoughts that are coming up for me. Am I ruminating, thinking about the past? Am I projecting? Am I gambling? Am I threatening? Am I worrying? Am I blah blah? And when we start labeling them, it's funny how once you label it, it leaves you alone. It's like you put it in a drawer. I can get it later.
Okay.
And so there's a process. I mean, without getting into too much detail, there's a process. But I would say, if for your audience, like if you want to take away from today something that's going to start to make a difference, I would say take it as an hypothesis, accept it as a reality that you're going to accept for the moment, and play with the idea of.
Consider.
And let's start playing with the idea that you're not your thoughts. I think that idea alone, I am not my thoughts, it gives a rise to so many questions. Well, if I'm not my thoughts, what are my thoughts? And if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? Start playing with those questions, and it will lead you, Michael, we have an internal intelligence, our intuitive sense of things, that if we just give it a chance to speak to us, we already know all the answers.
Mhm.
We really do. You when somebody said, well, I didn't know what to do, but I had a hunch of
Right.
what to do, right? It's just our intuitive intelligence telling us, this is the way to go. So if you just play with that idea, and as a completely new concept and what it might lead to, it will lead you to the questions that will lead you to want to take on, experimenting more.
About your life. Yeah. It's
Mm-hmm.
just consider, something to consider. Right.
Yes, something to consider. Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. I mean, that's pretty powerful because now shifting a little bit here, but it's powerful because there are people in the world who want to be or can be up to big things in their life that can be life changing, not only for them, but the people in their lives. And there's that little thought in the background that probably stuck with them since they were 3, and it says to them, yeah, they're going for something big, but that thought says like you're not good enough to do it. But that thought is not who they are, you know? And
That's right.
so
That's right.
yeah, yeah.
That's right. That's right.
And this is something good for people to consider so that, you know, it's really breaking out of the mold or the trap, I guess,
The
that
conditioning. The
the
conditioning.
condition.
You know, somebody, especially women in this society, you know, when a young girl sees that her brother is asked, well, what are you going to be when you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
And she's asked, you know, well, what kind of a man are you going to marry when you grow up? The signals are there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the signals, those ideas that you're not whole, that you're not complete, and they're just not true. They're just not true.
Not
But the
true. Yeah.
conditioning lays these layers of belief on. And once we can start realizing that we're not our thoughts, then we can start accepting that maybe our thoughts came from somewhere else other than from me. Maybe it's the conditioning that was laid on me, and
That was put on you.
maybe it's not helpful.
And that's a process of, you know, reconditioning yourself so that cannot be you. So, man, you say you're 74, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You've done a lot of things. You know, from a lawyer to a restaurant owner, from you know, you're teaching at Elon University in Tennessee, correct?
North Carolina.
North Carolina. I'm sorry, North Carolina. And you've done all these things. I mean, how has all this like really influenced your purpose in life?
So I used to read science fiction. One of my favorite authors was Isaac Asimov, and he was very prolific. He wrote lots of books and textbooks, and he just wrote a lot. And somebody once asked him, you know, where do you get all those crazy ideas? And his answer was, he wrote a long essay explaining it, but in a nutshell, it was basically this: that you have to have a lot of bits of information, and then you have to have a mind that is willing to put those bits together and kind of notice when it's a good match.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say the answer to your question is having all those different experiences has given me a lot of different bits of information and given me the honor of seeing so many things from different perspectives that it allows me to choose from a tool belt that is varied, so that I can pick the right tool for the proper situation. You know, often we run into people, and there's this expression, a one-trick pony, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are people that have learned like a winning formula. They learn some way that they're being, like there might be a particular politician whose name I won't mention, who seems to have a winning formula of being angry and talking about things that frighten people.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems to be his winning formula. And he's a one-trick pony because no matter what situation comes to him, he always responds with that response.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a variety of experiences from a variety of perspectives, maybe you say anger might be appropriate for sometimes, especially when you're talking to the people in the utilities, like the phone company.
Okay. Bills.
Sometimes, you know, you have to get angry, but that's not always the best response. And so I would say that what it's done is it's given me a variety of ways. And if I can just pull in a little Taoism into that,
Yeah.
one of the basic teachings of Taoism is to learn how to go with the flow, but not the trap of going with the flow is like taking your hands off the wheel and just allowing whatever's going to happen to you happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going with the flow. Going with the flow in Taoism, we talk about becoming aware of the situation of the river that you're in, and then responding in the most wise and profound way to that situation. So, like if you're in the ocean and you want to swim into shore, well, you can panic and drown, or you can just be bullheaded and say, and I'm swimming into shore, and you might get there, but you'll be exhausted. Or you might say, I notice that sometimes the tide is going in and sometimes it's going out. And when it's going in, it's giving me a boost. But when it's going out, it's getting in the way. So if I can swim like heck when it's going toward shore and just hold my position and save my energy when it's going against me, I can move forward and hold, move forward and hold. I'll get into shore. I will have saved a lot of energy. I will have been effective, efficient, accomplished my goal with less energy. Now, if I can live life like that, that's what Master Nee taught me. He said, that is what mastery of life is. Using the least energy possible to be the most effective and efficient by aligning yourself with the appropriateness of the time that you're in.
Yeah, that takes something. Exactly. How do you do that?
How do you do that? Well, in Taoism, we have a practice that teaches that. And it's called the I Ching, the classical book of changes. And what the I Ching basically says is that there is a cycle of movement. Day turns to night, night turns to day, winter turns to summer, but good times also turn to bad times, and bad times always turn to good times. And so if you look at the cycle of behaviors, you can learn like where you are on the cycle. And the way that you learn that is the I Ching actually cuts that cycle into 64 pie slices and 6 sub pie slices. And if you just read a little bit every day, you just read a little bit of the I Ching, just one of the little things, and you learn about the labels of the times. Like there's a time to punch through. There's a time to retreat. There's a time to advance. There's a time to calculatingly wait. There is a time of great propitiousness. There are time to dim the light. So you learn all of these times. It teaches you all of these different times, and it teaches you how to act wisely there. And so that was what Master Nee, strenuously wrote us to practice every day. And I would say that after a while, it becomes muscle memory. So there are practices, there are practices that you can learn. I would suggest picking up a copy of, it's called the Ching, the I Ching. And the one that I like the most is the illustrated I Ching by R.L. Wing. And it has all the instructions about how to practice and all what you need. And remember I told you about my therapist throwing coins? Didn't I say about I went to my therapist and he was throwing coins?
Yes.
Well, that's what he was doing. He was
in the I Ching.
Practicing the I Ching.
Well, you also, which is really cool, you have a meditation book as well that you offer. There's a free download.
Yes.
And so 38 pages or something like that, flip book,
right?
That I started to read, which is really good. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So everybody always asks me, how do I get started? What do I need to know? Where do I go? What resources? Blah, blah. So I wrote a little 40-page primer on education. It's called Is It For Me? What It Is, What It's Not, How to Get Started. And you can go to my website, and it's a free download. No obligation, no cost. And it has resources in it, and it tells you a little bit about the kind of meditation that I teach and how I teach it. But it also gives you some apps and gives you the basics of what meditation is and the basic instructions and all that. And so it'll give you a good idea of what that's all about. There's another one that's downloadable called 25 Tips and Tricks to Relax that you can learn in 5 minutes.
And for those people who get stressed real quick,
Yeah,
it's a good resource.
like box breathing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So those are downloadable. And on my website, there's also a free downloadable 56 gigabytes of guided meditations and instruction pamphlets and instruction sheets. And, you can just browse through the whole library and, take whatever you want. It's all free.
that's awesome. Yeah, I started to look at it, and a lot of things that I do as far as my meditation, a lot of that aligned with. So I was looking forward to having you on and having this conversation, and it's a peaceful conversation, and so what you've been through, which I know probably was exciting at the time, is being a lawyer, which you kind of you still are a lawyer a little bit, huh?
Yeah, I still represent folks in the world of abuse, neglect, and dependency, parents whose kids have been taken by the Department of Social Services because they've been neglected. And my job is to, of course, represent them in court, but at the same time, help them to understand what they need to do. They get about a year to get their act together to get their kids back.
Hmm.
Some people, for them, the drugs and the anger are more important than their kids, and there's nothing you can do. Uh, some people, their kids are the most important things in the world, and they just say, you say, the department says jump, they say how high.
Hmm.
And there's some other unfortunate souls who really, really want to get their kids back, but they just don't have the capacity because of different obstacles in their intellect or their emotional makeup, and those are the ones that are heartbreaking. But my job is to help them, figure out how to get their stuff
Stuff together.
together.
And you're an
So
advocate for that.
it's
That's
fun. So
awesome.
I still do that one day a week.
Do that, and you're teaching at Elon University
Hmm.
as a mindfulness coach, and you talk about happy the world of what was it? I have a question about it. I can't find it necessarily, but you talk about the happiness. You're a happiness coach or something like that.
Um, Maybe I talked about the work ethic of happiness.
The work ethic of happiness. That's what it was.
Hmm.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, we everybody, the one common thing that people all across the world share is that all we want to do is be happy.
Hmm.
And I mean, by happy, I think we're not talking about, momentary, hedonistic, little joyful charge, but we're talking about something that's kind of a long lasting sense of purpose, meaning, fulfilling life that, provides us with that kind of stability, confidence, and sense that I can do this, so that, you don't feel like you're battered around by life. You maybe, yeah. So, so if you want to be happy, um, you need to put some effort into it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of the brain science, we know that we have to. The world will not flood you with joyful, beautiful stuff unless you go out and open yourself up to it. It
Hmm.
will flood you with a lot of ugly stuff. It
Hmm.
will flood you with a lot of news about mass shootings and traffic accidents and bus derailings, and you'll hear about that stuff all the time. You don't hear about the stuff that's invigorating and enlightening and inspiring unless you seek it out.
That's right.
So you know take the opportunity. I would put it this way: we have a responsibility to awe and beauty.
Mm-hmm.
We have a responsibility to bring that into our lives, not because it makes us a better person, which it will, and not because it'll make a better world, which it will, but because it makes us happy.
Because it makes us happy, and there's nothing wrong with being happy.
And there's nothing wrong with being happy.
You have an
Can I,
extraordinary.
can I just offer that? You know, Jesus is said to have made two great commandments. One of them is to love your neighbor as yourself. And in the West here, you know, we have this Marlboro Man icon of being self-sustaining and pulling ourselves up by the bootstraps and being independent, having to do everything on our own. And we think that it's kind of selfish to say, you know, I need to love myself.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, from a Christian perspective, you do need to love yourself. You need to love yourself in the way that God loves you, completely and unconditionally, because Jesus commanded, love your neighbor as you love yourself. If you don't love yourself, you can't follow the commandment and love your neighbor. If you're self-critical, you will love your neighbor by being self-critical. We have a responsibility to our neighbors to learn to love ourselves, take care of ourselves.
Yeah, if you loving yourself, loving your neighbor as much as you love yourself, or as like you love yourself. And if you're loving on yourself, I mean, it can make a lot of difference. It can make a major difference in the world that we live in. And yeah, there's a lot going on with the world right now. I mean, it's been extraordinary talking to you and, you know, sharing this time with you. I'd like to know what would be, for your last words on the podcast, what would you story, advice, what words would you give as your last words?
Have a pet.
I agree.
Especially a dog. Especially a dog. There's nothing
agree.
like a dog. Have somebody that you go have the worst day in the whole world, have everybody beat up on. You go home and that dog licks you, and it's all good.
Yeah.
But I would say love yourself enough to give yourself a few minutes every day routinely. Pick a time, you know, and sit out or sit in or look out your window or wherever you are, you know, look out and just give yourself a few minutes to reflect on the fact that the mere fact that you are a human being means that you're something very, very special. You're unique. And allow yourself, you know, that dignity. I am a human being. I have a right at the table of humanity. I love it the way they said in Desiderata. You are a child of the universe no less than the trees and the stars. And whether you know it or not, the universe is expanding and it is unfolding exactly as it should.
As it should. Powerful. Bob, thank you for being here. Appreciate you. And for all the listeners and watchers, make sure to get his information. That's going to be in the description. And just continue to make thriving your new normal. Bob, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.